Hello and welcome to a new video on the channel. Today I'm back at Porsche HQ in Reading, Porsche GB, to test drive and review this Porsche Cayenne. And it's not a Cayenne something, it's a Cayenne base model. So this is going to be quite interesting because I've been used to quite a lot of Porsches that have had quite a lot of options on them, but this one looks as though it has nothing. We'll look at the spec sheet later on in the video, but I don't think that's going to take too long. I've noticed even the speakers don't even have Bose on them. I think it's got, the Dolomite silver paint at around £1,000, and I think there is some power steering plus. I think that's probably about it. This is about as base as you can get, so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that feels in terms of, does it feel like a quality, exciting, slightly loaded up with kit car, or does it feel as though they've just given us enough just to lock it and unlock it or something like that? So anyway, let's get on the road, get it back up to Leicester and get it on some more familiar roads, and then we can see what it's like. Join me a couple of days later when I've had a bit more time to get acquainted with the Cayenne, driving it myself and having the family in it as well. And you join me on my favourite roads in Leicestershire around Bradgate Park. So I like to test all the cars on my favourite roads because it's a great way of having a kind of a level playing field, obviously, to compare. And I do like driving around here as well. So it's in and around Bradgate Park. And I like the roads because there's some that are quite open, so they're reasonably fast. A lot that are sort of sweeping, changes of camber, tight turns, lots of kind of dynamic range to kind of get a bit of a feel for the car. So if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe and join me because I do a lot of different car reviews. Hopefully some of them you'll find interesting. So I've had a couple of days to settle into the Cayenne now. Again, like I said with the Panamera, it's fitting in frighteningly well to my life. So of course it's fairly obvious from the Cayenne point of view that there's no problem with fitting in everything that I need to do in this car as a family. There's loads of space in the back, it's a huge boot as well, which we'll get onto in a minute, and even the dog likes it as well. So yeah, there's no limitation on space, that's for sure. Now, as I probably mentioned earlier, this is the base model, so there have been a few grumblings from the children in the back about the lack of mood lighting and also the lack of kind of interactivity in the back, but that's kind of been balanced out by the passenger screen, which they're really taken with, the fact that it's touchscreen and they can control their music. There have been grumblings as well that they all miss the pan roof. Yes, I think that might be a bit of an issue in terms of if you were going to trade it on, if you like, but we'll get onto that when we talk a bit more about the spec. So this is the new Cayenne, which has had, you could say it's a lot more than a midlife refresh or facelift. Normally you would expect a facelift at this kind of time of this car's life, but it's been quite a lot more than that. They've spent an awful lot of time and an awful lot of development money updating and quite a lot about this car, from the looks, the quality of the interior, the infotainment, and also mechanically as well. I think the reason for that is this car has probably got to soldier on a little bit longer than expected. They might be looking at maybe until 2026, but in the meantime there might be an all-electric Cayenne as well. So they're probably going to sell the two alongside. Rather than it being replaced, it's going to have to live on that little bit longer. So in terms of the design then, there's a lot to like. The front end has been updated. I think the lights are a big improvement. Obviously technically there's a lot of improvement, but I think just the look of them as well. They look really modern, and I think from the front end it gives it a new clean look. The grills have got really large. They're starting to be reminiscent of the Mark 1 Turbo. So I'm not sure I'm 100% on that. Certainly when you look at it right from the front, it does make it look very mouthy. But I do like the approach angle. It looks, really purposeful, like it would be really good off-road. I think the back looks absolutely fantastic. It's obviously got the new 3D full-width light bar on it, and the back end tends to look really clean and quite sculptured, so big improvement on the back, bit of half and half on the front, I would say, from my personal opinion. I think one of the things that I was apprehensive about when I signed up to test the base model was how base would it feel, because I do like a base model. I've driven, obviously, in the previous video you can see here, I drove the 992 and 911 base model, which I was really impressed with. It didn't feel base at all. And design-wise, overall, this doesn't feel base. So I was really surprised with the amount of kit that you get as standard, because that's not something that Porsche is known for. I didn't expect the rear boot opening to be standard. We've got heated seats as standard, full leather interior as standard as well. The sort of controls in the centre with the gloss black look really premium. You've got your air conditioning. All of the infotainment is all the latest version that looks really premium. You've got the passenger screen that you can only see if you're sitting in the passenger seat, so it's directional, which again feels premium. Initially I just thought that was blanked off, and I thought, oh, here we go, that's the first sign that this is not as premium as maybe it could be, but it isn't. You get the full infotainment even on this base model, which is great. So the only kind of things that I've seen so far in terms of it feeling a little bit bass from the design point of view is probably the speakers and the audio system. I've heard in other people's videos that they didn't like the bass speaker system, the standard speaker system, and people started talking about that Bose was the entry level or where you should start at for a good quality premium sound. I think the first thing that you notice, which is fairly obvious when you get in, is the nice driving position height, which is unusual for a lot of my normal experience with Porsches like Cayennes and 911s. But it does feel nice and stately, and it feels comfortable as well. It rides over bumps nicely. The seats are really comfortable. It's the first time I've had Porsche that has all leather seats, so there's no Alcantara and there's no mixture of materials, and I think they are kind of aimed more towards the comfort rather than sporty, but I'm liking that. It fits with the vibe of the car, to be honest. I must say, from the exterior point of view, I do like the base look on the outside of the car. Maybe the wheels do look a little bit small, but I do like the black elements along the sills. I think sometimes Cayennes can look a little bit ostentatious, certainly if you've got really big wheels and they're all blacked out and that sort of look. But I think in this Dolomite Silver, which looks like a kind of a Porsche Heritage type colour, and the fact that you've just not gone for the big wheels, it gives you that bit more ride comfort because you've got the really big sidewalls on the tyres, and it's making it as the least shouty it can be in a way. I think it makes it look a little bit more like the off-roader that we know it is capable of being. It's got a purposeful look about it. So what's it like to drive? Well, we've got 3 drive modes. We've got normal, we've got sport, and we've also got off-road as well with a gravel setting on it. I haven't had a chance to use the off-road settings, but I have had a chance to use the sport, and the sport also has active dampers where you can put them in sport and sport plus. It doesn't have a huge amount of difference, but it does feel different when you press on a little bit. And I must say that the way that the car manages its weight when you're kind of hustling it in corners is quite surprising. It does inspire confidence to hustle it quicker than you would expect to be able to for a kind of 2-ton car. I suppose some of the modes where you normally switch into sport and things hunker down a little bit, it doesn't feel like it actually hunkers down, it just feels like it firms up a touch. How it reduces the amount of roll that you get in corners is quite impressive. I wouldn't say that the ride is as cosseting maybe as a Q7 or a Q8, so you do feel the bumps and undulations through the massive tyres, but they are sort of muted a little bit. It is quite a nice place to be in terms of the interior space and also the comfort, but maybe it doesn't lock out the outside world in the way that I expected it to. I'm quite surprised to report that the gearbox does feel a little bit dated and a little bit slow. I think we can kind of get away with it because we're in an SUV. I think if we were still on different versions of the Tiptronic gearbox in any of the sports cars, we'd probably be into trouble by now. So it does feel a bit sort of dim-witted, and also it feels a little bit clunky, particularly when you're setting off in the morning. It was a little bit sort of jarring initially. And also when you're on a hill and it rolls back a little bit and then you put your foot on the accelerator, it does feel a little bit kind of agricultural in how it engages the gear. But a lot of the time, just for wafting about and just not really worrying about the gearbox, it does that really well. But I suppose when your driving is a little bit more spirited, it is a little bit more noticeable that it is a little bit slower than probably you would expect. I haven't really used the paddles because, again, I just don't really feel that they're kind of in keeping with the car. I'm just letting the gearbox do its thing. And to be honest, with Tiptronic Plus, I think it does, when we put it into sport, I think it does kind of up its game a little bit. It doesn't detract too much away from the sporting drive. But how close do you expect to be to a 911 in a 2-ton SUV? From that respect, it does still feel like a Porsche. Yes, it's always going to be a compromise. Any 4-seater large Porsche is going to be a compromise in terms of the driving experience. But I think you've got to see it like that. You've got to see that you've got the best of both worlds. Again, just slowing down then, it does feel as though the car runs away with you a little bit and you really have to use the brakes a lot. Maybe that's because I'm used to using a manual gearbox to slow the car down as well. But sometimes you really do feel as though the engine and the drivetrain want to keep going, but the brakes want to stop the car, and it almost seems like they're not perfectly in unison. So some headline figures then for those of you that like the stats. We've got a 3-litre turbocharged V6 in this base model, which has got a twin scrolls turbocharger. So obviously there's not really any lag, or no lag in terms of the turbocharger. The lag, as I've already said, tends to come with the gearbox. It's got a maximum power output of 358 horsepower. And I must say that when you put your foot down, it certainly does pick up pretty well. It's quite impressive for the size of the car that it is. You've got 500 Newton meters of torque at 1,450 RPM to 4,500 RPM. And of course, I don't need to say it's all-wheel drive, and it's got an 8-speed Tiptronic S gearbox. And it's got auto stop-start as well. And to keep us on the road, or to keep us accelerating briskly without too much wheel spin, we've got Porsche traction management. Top speed is 154 miles an hour. The base model Cayenne will do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6 seconds, which is pretty impressive for a 2-ton car. It's got 6-piston monoblock calipers with internally ventilated 360mm discs at the front and 4-piston 350mm discs at the back. We've got 275/45 XL 20-inch wheels at the front, and tyres obviously, and 305/40 XL 20 inches at the rear as well. We've got a 76-litre fuel tank, and the quoted range is 26.2 miles per gallon. So I must say that I'm quite impressed with the miles per gallon and the range that it's doing so far. I'm at 261 at the moment, and I've driven all the way back from Reading to Leicester, and I've been doing quite a bit of mileage around Bradgate and different areas as well with the family. So yeah, it's doing pretty well in terms of miles per gallon. At the moment on the screen I've got a quoted 21.5 miles per gallon. And I've been doing some spirited driving as well. So one of the benefits of a Cayenne then is the boot space. So we've got 698 litres of boot space, which is pretty big. You can get the dog in, and pretty much everything that you would need for a weekend away with the kids. So yeah, it's a pretty impressive boot. Also, when you fold the seats down, you've got 1,708 litres of space, which is absolutely enormous. You could do all of those trips to the tip if you don't mind getting your interior dirty, or you've got some really nice rubber mats. It's a pretty practical vehicle in terms of the stuff that you can fit in the boot. As with most Porsches, you've got a 20,000 mile 2-year service interval, which is pretty good, and you've got a 3-year warranty from new as well. So when it comes to the PCM and the interfaces then, I'm really impressed with this. We've got a very ultra-modern looking main dashboard. We can flick through various modes, so we can go down to a very kind of simple just speed mode, and obviously speedometer mode or sat-nav mode. We can have 3 dials, we can have 5 dials, so that's pretty neat. It's quite nice, and there's some really nicely detailed graphics as well. We can have the music information on there, tyre pressures, all sorts of different things like that. We've got the latest iteration of PCM in here as well. We've got the really nice large 11.9 inch screen. We've got great connectivity with Apple CarPlay. A lot of the driver mode setup and the vehicle setup that we can do on here as well all works really well. And as mentioned, we've got the passenger screen as well, which I can't see because it's directional, but the passengers can use it, and it's touch screen and they can control and choose music and everything else. So that's gone down really well with the kids who love that. They're missing the mood lighting, as I mentioned, and they're missing the pan roof, but in terms of still making it feel premium, the electronics and the PCM is top notch. I can't imagine it being much better on the higher models. You pretty much get everything that you would want as standard, so that's great. Got a nice area to put your phone in as well, which is right up front, so I'm not going to reach back here, although I have got USB-C in here and in the rear as well. But I've got a cool charging pad because there were problems with phones overheating, so that works quite nicely, and even more USB connections in there as well. So no problems with the connectivity for the Apple phone that I've got, and I'm sure Android just works the same as well. If we look at the spec sheet for this particular Cayenne, I normally stop for this and sort of lean out of the side of the car and do my normal kind of piece to camera, but this is probably one of the lowest spec'd Porsches that I've ever actually borrowed, even more than the 911 possibly, because all we've got is the base price of this particular Cayenne is £67,400. And then if we look at what Porsche GB have optioned onto it, we've got Dolomite Silver Metallic at £899, which, as I say, is kind of a traditional Porsche colour, and I quite like that. It's not very shouty, it's a little bit heritage, so I kind of quite like that. We've got Power Steering Plus as well, obviously adaptive power steering, at £222. And then we've got the surround view with active parking support. So we've got parking sensors on the front, parking sensors on the rear, and then we've got this lovely overhead view that we've seen in some of the more premium Porsches as well. But that's cost £1,116, so it's quite expensive. But I've been in a few car parks and parked a few times, and I really would not want this car without that overhead bird's eye view and the parking sensors. It's very difficult. It's not too difficult to see the front corners, but it's kind of almost impossible to see the back corners. So you definitely need to spend that £1,000 or £1,116. I think that's a must. But then that's it. So the total price of this Cayenne, base Cayenne, is £69,637. So we're still under £70,000. But as I've said, that's probably as low as you would want to go. I think if I was going to spec it, I might choose a slightly more interesting colour, and maybe I might make the wheels a little bit bigger because they do look a little bit small, although we're probably going to lose some quality of ride if we do that. The only thing that at the moment makes it look base is the wheels. But let's get on to things that I really like then. Well, I do think the looks are a big improvement. I really like the new lights at the front. I think they are nicely sculptured, and I think it does give that a slightly more modern, progressive look to it. A little bit like probably appeared in the Panamera first, so the lights do look sort of bang up to date and quite sculptured. And also the light bar on the back, I think, looks nicely integrated. Looks great at night when it's fully illuminated, and that's kind of the new Porsche look, and the three-dimensional badging as well is really cool. So yeah, I think it's a big hit in terms of look. It looks bang up to date. To be fair, I think it's the best looking Cayenne that we've ever had. I do like the floating Taycan style dash, the sort of rimless, frameless screen that it's got on here. I know obviously a few Porsche aficionados, particularly like with the 911, they're going to like to stick to the centre tack that's a real tack with a digital display either side, and this is all fully digital, so that might offend a few people if it was in the 911, but I think in here it's fine. The amount of information that we've got, the resolution of the screen and everything, it just brings the car bang up to date and makes it look modern. And I think the whole dashboard does that, the digital interface, the cleanness of and the horizontal lines of the dashboard really make it look modern and up to date. The only thing that probably doesn't so much is the seats. The seats are starting to look a little bit sort of old. I don't know whether the design has changed, but they didn't strike me as looking as kind of cool and modern and Porsche-like as the seats that I've seen in 911s and Caymans and Taycans to a certain extent. Things I don't like then, well, you've probably heard them throughout the video chiming away in the background. Now, this is probably not a Porsche-centric thing, so bear with me for a moment, but there are a lot of driver assistance chimes on this car that I really don't like. So if I go ever so slightly over the speed limit, not that I do that normally, but just if it just creeps up when I'm rolling down a hill or something like that, it bongs at me, which is a little bit annoying. Also, but that's not too much of a problem because obviously I can stay under the speed limit. But it's got lane assist as well. So if I slightly move over a line, or if a line is unusual, or I've got to go around a car, it bongs at me, which it's doing now. So I find that really annoying. And also sometimes it will react to what it sees as hazards and bang the brakes on, or to take the steering a little bit and move me out the way. It did it. I came over the crest of a hill and there were some people standing at the side of the road, and the car automatically saw that as danger and almost kind of pulled me out of the way and vibrated everything. I really didn't like it. But I suppose that's not too bad, because you can say, well, Carl, you can switch that off, you idiot. Which you can. You can go into the menu system and undo all the ticks and switch that off. But what annoys me is that the next time you get in, even if you get out for a minute and you get back in the car, they all come back on again. You've got to almost switch them off every time. Now, let me know in the comments if there is a way to permanently switch those off, because I've not had the car very long and I can't find it, and I haven't had the time to look. If you can permanently switch them off, that's great. But if I'm going to have to switch those off every single time, something else that I'm not massively keen on is the gearbox. I'm always quite surprised when I drove that Cayenne GT of the last version of the Cayenne, which nobody watched the video to. So please click the link above and have a look at that Cayenne GT video, because that's an amazing car. But I was quite surprised with that car, with it being from the GT department, that it still had a gearbox that said Tiptronic. When I don't see PDK on the options list, I do start to get to worry, because the Tiptronic, even with this Tiptronic S, does feel a little bit dim-witted, and it certainly wouldn't last or be accepted in any of the sports cars. So we've put the Cayenne into sport mode now, and we've got a couple of settings on the dampers that we can use, Sport or Sports Plus. So I've put them into Sport Plus, just to see if it changes the reaction time of the gearbox, and it does bring along its A game once you put it into Sports Plus. The shifts are that little bit quicker. I think the steering weights up nicely as well. It's very little body roll, because obviously the dampers and the suspension has firmed up that little bit. But that's quite impressive. I think the shifts, not only were they quicker, but they were smoother as well. So maybe I take back what I said about the gearbox. Or maybe it does feel a little bit lethargic when it's in normal mode and around town. But actually, when we're using it in Sport Plus mode, it does feel that little bit more engaging. And I think interestingly as well, so I've got it in Sport and with Sport Plus dampers, so the gearbox feels more responsive, and also the driving feels more like a Porsche, more like I would expect. But the interesting thing is, as well, it doesn't feel like a compromise. It's not making the car feel uncomfortable, so like it probably would do in a GTS, where I'd be like, right, let's back that all off because this is not as comfortable a ride. It still feels comfortable, but it feels more responsive. So I'd kind of almost say, well, why would I not just leave it in sport all the time? Because it's not uncomfortable in sport, but it drives how I want it to drive. Maybe the normal setting is for better fuel economy and those kind of things. So maybe on a day-to-day basis, it's better for the environment, better for my fuel economy. But it's not better for how I feel about the car. It's nice just to have it in sport mode. And that makes me feel like I've been unfair to the gearbox, because I think maybe it's not Porsche's fault. Maybe it's just having to hit those EU targets of fuel consumption and fuel economy means they have to have a normal mode. I think in terms of it having a V6, obviously this is the base model. You'd probably normally think of a car like this as having a V8 or something like that. I think the V6 does the job well. It's pretty responsive, but I suppose there's not really much there in terms of noise. It doesn't feel underpowered or under-engined in any way, which I think is probably one of the preconceptions that I was coming to this with. Is it going to feel, I suppose certainly after I'd driven the GT Cayenne with the V8, you know, is this going to feel underpowered? And I don't think it does. It still feels pretty brisk for the size of car that it is. If you just give it a bit of throttle just as we come out into the countryside. brakes do a pretty good job, and they are stopping an awful lot of weight after all. I think they do it does feel like it sort of gets away from you at some points though. It feels as though when you're braking, it's almost as though the Tiptronic is still actually wanting you to go. So it's kind of almost like the brakes are working against the transmission. But maybe that's just because I'm used to using the gearbox to help myself slow down. Now, one of the things I didn't expect to complain about was the audio system. I did hear another YouTuber say that they thought that base model or basic audio in a Porsche is always quite bad. I'm not really an audiophile, so I'm not an expert on audio systems, and I've always thought, well, I'm sure the base audio will be fine because so much else about the car is fine. But I have found in this car, it's the first Porsche that I've had from Porsche GB that just has the base audio. It isn't that great. It's quite surprising, really. All of the others have had Bose, and people even complain about Bose, but I always found Bose really good. The bass response and the treble, there was a nice balance between that. It was as bassy as I wanted it to be. But with this, I've had to go into the settings and turn the bass all the way up to maximum to try to stop it sounding tinny. Also, it sounded as though it was coming from the middle of the dashboard as well, rather than it being an immersive sound. And I actually had to go into the system and move the center of where the audio is more towards the back of the car so that it sounded like it was where I wanted it to be. And I've never really had to do that with a speaker system. Also, when it was a bit louder, the door panels started to vibrate and have that vibrating resonance that you would expect in a Vauxhall Corsa from the 90s or something. So I was quite surprised to experience that, because that's something that you automatically attribute to a car that's a lot less than a Porsche. So yeah, I'm quite surprised to kind of have to say, don't get the bass audio, make sure that you go for Bose or higher than that. Another small thing that annoys me as well, and this again might be my stupidity or lack of time with the car, is nowhere on the dashboard, even through the modes, can I find how many miles this car's done. It's probably in here somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it. This steering wheel is new for this particular model of Cayenne, and I do like it. I think it's got a really nice premium feel to it. It is just the standard steering wheel, so there's no Alcantara or anything like that, and we haven't got any silver elements. They're all kind of just matte black, but I think it does feel nice quality and premium. We've got the drive mode switch there, which is reminiscent of the 911. Maybe I might go for Alcantara. The only thing I am missing, and that I'm disappointed with, is I haven't got the heated steering wheel. One of the things that I am missing as well, or I'm not happy about, is not having a panoramic roof. And I know also from listening to car journalists, panoramic roofs are a good thing to have when you come to resell the car, because it's something that people expect. So to sum up then, I really like the base model Cayenne. I think it's a really nice quality, premium feeling product that has more kit on it than I actually expected to get for the price point for a Porsche. There are a few omissions that personally I would like to add to the car. I think maybe the Dolomite Silver is probably a little bit too basic and retro for me, and it costs a premium. So whether I would have a white car or I would wrap it in Oslo blue to make it look really kind of cool and trendy, or maybe even Viper green or something like that. I think I'd have slightly cooler wheels, not too ostentatious, but a little bit cooler. I definitely have the panoramic roof as well. And I think personally, it's amazing how full leather interior doesn't seem as premium as it used to. I think having a nice mix of materials and Alcantara is nicer. So maybe a bit of Alcantara and leather, or maybe, I love that seat fabric you used to get in the Carrera T's as well. That's kind of cool. So only a few little bits and bobs really, nothing too expensive. But yeah, I'm quite surprised at how premium it is, and I'm quite surprised at how much the infotainment lifts that premium feel. So that's about it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you get the chance, and hit the notification bell so you're notified when I produce new videos. Plenty more content to come, I'm sure. Check out some of the older videos that I've done as well, so hopefully you'll find something that you like. But anyway, thanks very much, and bye for now.